It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, a big shout out to be listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. This week we were I was in Calgary, and I was at Grow Canada, hosted that Farming 4.0, that tech panel. That was a great time. Really, really good time. I learned a lot. Those panelists were excellent. I ran into so many fans of this show, people listening on a daily basis to keep up to speed on what's happening in the industry of agriculture and really making RealAgriculture one of those information suppliers to them. Farmers, people in the industry. It was really, really great to see so many people and people walk up and introduce themselves. I really, really do appreciate it. Next week, going to be at APAS's annual general meeting. We're going to be in Regina on Tuesday. Looking forward to that. We're going to do a show, as I've been talking about, on the carbon tax and the impact that it's having on farmers in Saskatchewan and really beyond across the country. So looking forward to it. If you have any feedback on the carbon tax, now it's impacting your farm, whether you're for it or against it, just, you can get a hold of me. Easy way to do that, quite frankly, on any topic, is shaney@realagriculture.com, or you can always call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Today, we got a product spotlight with Bushel Plus. Lyndsey Smith is going to talk to the CEO and founder of Bushel Plus here in a little bit. We're also going to do a RealAg Issues Panel like we do every Friday. Kelvin Heppner and Lyndsey Smith will be here. We're going to talk about 234, get an update there. The shenanigans in the Senate continue. We're going to talk a little bit about Bill 282 as well. We're also going to talk about, farm profitability. I want to hit on that. And what's happening on Bay Street when it comes to banks, and how does that work its way back to what some of the tightening could look like when it comes to farmers' loans in 24. And we've also got an update on the jobs number. Yeah, that's right. November jobs numbers are out today, and we'll talk about that a little bit, as well as this economy kind of does slow down. Doesn't grind it to a halt, but she is slowing down. Okay. Let's pause here. We'll take a break. And when we come back, we're going to hear a product spotlight with Bushel Plus. You're listening to RealAg Radio. And, of course, we're on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. We'll be right back right after this.
Picture this. You've just taken a photo that really celebrates agriculture and your community. Why not share it with the Lalman Hometown Roots Photo Contest for a chance to support your community with $5,000. Lalman is a family-owned company that supports growers with products like Lalfix Start Spherical Pulses and Lalfix Pro Yield Liquid Soybean. Visit LalmanHometownRoots.com for more information.
Peter Johnson at RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground, we are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. I am Lyndsey Smith, and joining me now for today's product spotlight is Marcel Kringe. He's CEO and founder of Bushel Plus. Welcome here, Marcel.
Yeah, hey, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, so for those who don't know, tell me about Bushel Plus. What products do you sell?
Yeah, right on. So Bushel Plus is a manufacturing and software company here in the heart of the prairies, Brandon, Manitoba headquartered, where we manufacture tools and products all around harvest optimization to make combines, harvest equipment more effective, save time, have farmers' life easier, more profitable, and more safe. And we are now operating or exporting into over 33 countries. So it started in the prairies, and we are manufacturing everything in North America locally.
All right. Now, you did mention, of course, optimizing harvest. Why should farmers spend that time on optimizing harvest when deadlines and budgets are already so tight?
Yeah, well, that is a great question. And, listening to the question, the answers are almost in your question, because budgets are so tight, and no one can really afford to lose more of the benefits or of the profit that we're getting at harvest, because we can only harvest once, right? We can reseed, we can respray, but harvest we can only do once, and we use the best fertilizer, the best seed. We talk about average harvest loss with a few bushel per acre, which is already a lot of money to be saved if you bring this down to a target under 1 bushel per acre. So it's always important to just check, just like calibrating your air seeder. You will always calibrate your air seeder switching from barley to canola, let's say, right? So why don't we calibrate our combines? The loss sensor needs to be calibrated. The automation function of the combine doesn't work without calibrating sensors and loss sensors. So our solutions products do all of that basically to help bring the loss down and keep the budgets in line. And then every product of Bushel Plus, if used correctly, helps saving time and be more effective and faster.
Now, your team puts on combine clinics to help producers do some of the things you've mentioned here. Why is that education and knowledge component so important to you as CEO and for this company?
It kind of started naturally where when we were going around being keynote speakers or talk about combines, people came up to us afterwards and said, hey, in those 20 minutes when Bushel Plus talked about combine optimization, we learned more than the rest of the day here. So do you guys do any more of this kind of stuff? And, we bring all this knowledge from all these different countries now into those clinics where it's not a sales pitch. It's really about making it work on the farmer's farm for the crops that they grow. It doesn't matter the combine and the color of the combine, very neutral way. Bring it back to your question. It is a big portion of us and our brand pillars where farmer success and continuous innovation is part of Bushel Plus. And it's a part of making the farms more profitable, which is the knowledge and the education around it. Because, people hire an agronomist, an accountant, they have all these experts, which is the right thing to do. But now it's also time for experts on harvest equipment because, again, I repeat myself here, but you can only harvest once. Let's do it right. And there's so many things we can do prior to harvest before it gets busy to get your machine set up properly. So,
and kind of pulling it from there, wrapping it all up here, how are Bushel Plus products different from perhaps what farmers have already been using to track or reduce losses?
Yeah, great. I think if you make it short, with those products, they work faster, safer, and more convenient, and you take the guesswork out of it. There is still, unfortunately, a lot of legends out there that are legends about combines and how to set them up and harvest that they're not correct. There's a lot of these things out there. And to address them with proper equipment and the tools, that's really part of the combine clinics. But then also of the products where looking on the ground is just not accurate enough. That's how we started. It's dirty. You're always guessing. You don't know what it is. And we've done tons of tests where we get people guessing on the ground versus the drop pen. And it's always off. Like the drop pen catches all the broken kernels in the entire loss versus you can't find half the kernels on the ground. And, it comes back to faster, safer, more convenient and save time. We have our mini combine now where you can check fields instead of taking the big combine out to the field. You check with the mini combine if it's ready. Our Bushel Plus Mad concaves, we can change concaves on an entire combine. One person in literally like 15, maybe 20 minutes, one person can do it versus a couple hours, a complete concave swap. So Bushel Plus is more than just what we've known for, the smart pan system. We acquired Mad Concaves last fall as an entire company, and we're bringing more solutions to the market, and our R&D pipeline is full of cool ideas. And, we have now over 30 employees in multiple countries, and working with large OEMs to dealers to farmers, bringing lots of that innovation to make your life easier.
All right, Marcel, thanks so much for joining me on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Have an awesome day.
CDC Endure is a new oat line from Alliance Seed. High yielding with excellent disease resistance and the quality end users ask for, all in one great oat variety. CDC Endure provides the high beta-glucan levels to make heart-healthy products like breakfast cereals. For more information on CDC Endure oats, as well as any other products from Alliance Seed, check out allianceseed.com or visit any Alliance Seed authorized retailers.
What were the issues in your fields this year? Did you do a soil sample? What is your soil sample telling you about some of the nutrient issues that you might be having going into next year? What herbicides did you use? What residues you might be concerned about? What weed issues did you have? What crop residues did you have? How well do you know your fields?
Get the answers to all the questions you have about your pulse crop at the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
Let's dig into the biggest issues of the week here on the RealAg Issues Panel. This segment's brought to you by Optimum Gly, a new canola trait technology from Corteva Agriscience. We're going to have to look at my notes on that one. I have said that so many times with our agri-technica coverage that make sure you check out Optimum Gly as you're thinking about your canola hybrid selection for 2024. Okay, let's dig in here with the panel, bring everybody in. We've got the regular gang kind of together here today, a bit of a sort of, hey, it's just us. This week. I'm really looking forward to all the different topics that are going on here this week. It's definitely been a busy past couple weeks indeed. Up first, it is Kelvin Heppner coming out of Otona, Manitoba. Kelvin, how are you doing?
Doing well here. Hard to believe it's December already, but another week has flown by, and here we are. Lots to talk about, like you said.
Now, Christmas shopping. Do you delegate that in the household, or are you an active participant? How would you describe your
it's probably a fair bit of delegation that happens. Kayla, my wife, looks after a lot of it, and she's got a good start on it. I'm trying to fill in a few of the holes, but it's maybe a bit more of a old school gender role thing that we've got going on Christmas.
Well, don't feel bad. Don't feel bad. We are the same. Actually, Trish and I have progressed to, do we really need to even get each other Christmas presents? We've progressed to that stage. So that's getting old right there. That's showing our age.
Yeah. I think we're at that point too, but the kids still, and there's always there's different things that they probably actually need, but we can give them as Christmas presents, that kind of thing too. So
yeah. Now, Lyndsey, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
That's good.
So well. I am fully enjoying this conversation.
Now,
so many things to say.
You probably delegate all the Christmas shopping to Chris. Is that
that is absolutely not true.
Really?
But no, because then we would end up with like somewhere around early February, we'd all be getting our presents. So, so in order for it to happen on time, I do most of it. But I would just like to share that nothing is more useless than the mom's stocking on Christmas morning. Because let's face it, it's usually the moms that are doing it all. So I will say I have gotten better year over year at actually getting the gifts that I need to send to other provinces. So my family's all back in Manitoba. I've been better at getting those out the door on time. For many years, I was spending an atrocious amount of money on like express packages to get there in time, and some of them still didn't. So I'm better at that. And I'm doing more online shopping, which sort of makes me cringe at times, but let's face it, it's just sometimes so much more efficient to just order stuff and have it come to you.
Trying to find a parking spot.
I hate shopping in general. So, but I've tried to buy local a lot more than I used to, and that has been really helpful. I go to like a small town and do it that way. Yeah, way better.
Okay, well, I remember one time it was like December 24th, and I still hadn't figured out what I was getting my wife. And I remember going to this jewelry store, and the lady looks at me, and we're talking like it's 2 p.m. on Christmas Eve.
Mm-hmm.
And not that I hadn't thought about what I was going to buy, or I hadn't put thought into it, so nobody be judgy about this. But the lady looks at me and she says, "Oh, you're one of those." So what do you mean, one of those?
She was judgy.
Yeah, she was very judgy.
She was judgy.
Okay, we got some economic data out this morning. Canada jobs, unemployment ticks up to 5.8% in November. Strong, well, I wouldn't say the strength in the jobs, but manufacturing and construction was where a lot of those new jobs were. Definitely weakness in some other areas. Kelvin, this is going to feed into, I think, the fact when the Bank of Canada gets together or provides the report on Wednesday, rates are staying exactly where they are.
That is definitely the consensus right now, that I think they're calling it a dovish hold is what people are anticipating. The last few we've been calling a hawkish hold. This one's a dovish hold. So there's starting to be a bit of a pivot in what the market and what economists and kind of traders are thinking is the Bank of Canada's direction here. So whether or not there's any surprises, there's still room for surprise. But like you said, yeah, the unemployment rate rose to 5.8%, which the amount that has risen since April's earlier this year, over that period of time, I think it's up almost a full percentage point now, which that amount of movement in that short a time usually signals a bit of a market downturn, or it usually comes ahead of the early stages of a market downturn. And so far, that higher unemployment rate is mainly coming from slower hiring, not on the layoff side of things. Just companies aren't filling roles as people leave. And so right now, wage growth is still surprisingly strong, and so that's also expected to cool here as labor demand cools relative to supply. So
yeah, and that 5.8%
driven by immigration,
right? Yeah, and that 5.8% is at the pre-pandemic level, correct? This is where we were.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, it is somewhere there, but it's still like from in a historical perspective, it's still relatively low, but it's just the fact that it's moved almost a full percentage points in the last 6-8 months.
And Lyndsey, we've had the bank earnings, and you'd think the banks are making no money the way that we'd heard about more layoffs. I think it was TD. It's like significant, 3,000 people, I think, was the number that they're laying off, if I remember correctly. Increasing loan loss provisions. I've already mentioned the cutting of jobs. So, yeah, you could feel the tightening here right now.
So, I mean, someone once said to me, they don't like to bank with banks, but they like to invest in banks because banks are really good at making money. So, to me, to see the reports this week of such significant, not just layoffs or planned layoffs or discussion of, but also the rapid increase in what they're setting aside ahead of time for what they're considering either bad loans or write-off loans, what they're anticipating. So they're anticipating either loans that are already in jeopardy, loans they suspect will become in jeopardy. And that number has skyrocketed for TD. I think we heard from Royal Bank, CIBC, and TD, and BMO. So like, banks are really good at making money, which means they're really good at planning, and they're really good at being and putting themselves in the best possible position, which means that to me is a big indication of just how pessimistic they might be on things in the next little while. They're going to make sure that, they're planning this so that they still make their money, but that means they're not backing a lot of Canadians right now saying you're going to pay your bills. They know full well there's going to be a lot of people that aren't going to be able to meet their debt obligations in the next little while. On
Tuesday's show, I mentioned this in the news. There was a great story in the Globe about the very strong times right now for private lenders. And there was a quote, I can't remember who, I think it was from PIMCO, who PIMCO had said that PIMCO's not a person, it's actually a bond trading company for everybody that doesn't watch Fox Business every day. PIMCO said that this is the best private loan environment since the banking crisis. Now, we don't have a lot of private lenders necessarily in agriculture, but I think it does speak to the fact, Kelvin, that I have to wonder if, as we see tightening and squeezing of farm margins, and there's sort of a narrative of possibly tougher times are ahead here, the shakedown when it comes to some of those loan books at some of the major banks when it comes to agriculture on the more riskier, this is where, net working capital, strength of the balance sheet, those things come into play here. I wonder if we're going to see some real tightening there.
I think we probably already have in some ways, especially, well, even just look at the stress tests that get run now with rates where they are versus where they were a year or two ago. I think there is already, and that's one of the reasons the private lending is increasing, is it's becoming harder to get the same amount of borrowing or to finance projects or new acquisitions in businesses or in farms and that type of thing. So, yeah, all these pieces to the puzzle kind of seem to fit that we're talking about here. So it seems like we're finally maybe seeing some of what we've been talking about the last couple of years, or the market. Many people have been expecting this to happen after the massive government spending that happened during the pandemic, and kind of we're still dealing with the consequences here. And of course, interest rates, again, historically not that high versus anybody that borrowed through the 80s. But versus the last 30 years, they are as high as they've been in the last 3 decades. So it's something that, a lot of things coming to roost here in the coming months and even over the next year, I think.
Yeah, and Lyndsey, I want to put a positive spin on this though too, is that even though in our Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index we see that farmers are negative about their current farm financial performance, their future farm financial performance, we know this, that whether the tightening is real or it's perception, there's opportunity there for people that do have, one, they know their numbers, two, they have this is where strong balance sheets, it really allows you to take advantage of some of those opportunities when there is these kinds of perceptions, real or not, out there.
Well, and it is true. And it probably, like to Kelvin's point, this is probably the first time for a lot of people in their career that we've sort of come to this point really well and truly, where the hard work and the discipline you've put in to, keeping your debt levels in check, to making sure you've got good working capital, to knowing your numbers, there may very well be opportunities for, let's face it, for some people, this is going to be a great time to expand. They're maybe going to be able to access land, maybe that they couldn't have in perhaps a more fast and loose sort of way where, people could easily access cash and there was a lot more competition for things. So I think you will definitely see those who have, who've got a good handle on their numbers, whose balance sheets are in good shape. It does really provide an opportunity to potentially, move on some things that wouldn't necessarily be possible in other instances. The other thing I will say is that for many of us, that, in this last 20, 30 years, this will be a significant sort of reminder that these things matter. So if you don't have a good handle on these things, now's a good time to start.
It's a test of how complacent maybe you have been through some of the good times. And listen, I don't want to sound super negative where, there is just disaster in front of us. I don't think that's the case, but it's a different environment than the one we have been experiencing as an industry over the past 3-4 years, for sure, I think is the way I would put that. It could be different.
But even the fact that we're talking in this tone, in this sense, is going to slow demand. People are going to be, in some ways, there's going to be less people taking chances on land or on that harder to justify equipment purchase. Right. Things like that and so the mentality is shifting right now, and there's like you said though, there's going to be opportunities as that demand drops and all of a sudden supply needs to correct to meet the lower demand. There could be some lower pricing opportunities, both equipment. There's been some discussion about that lately. Also land potentially in the U.S. There's signs of softening land market, not so much I think in Canada at this point, but potentially on the horizon too.
Well, there was a presenter at there was a presenter at Grow Canada this week from Rabobank. I'm trying to mix all the words together.
You got it.
And he was he gave a bullish argument. He is not on the bearish end of the equation when it comes to commodity prices. He presented an argument in terms of why he believes that maybe there's an overshoot from a bearish perspective. So I think, It was very much in line with when we had Chip Flory on the show going back about probably a month and a half ago, for the same kind of reasons. Demand globally is actually stronger than maybe some people think. So anyway, it's going to be, we'll be definitely talking about here over the coming months for sure. Okay, let's take a break. We've got more coming up here on the RealAg Issues Panel. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
When it comes to your farm, you demand performance, because what goes in determines what comes out. At Pride Seeds, we deliver on performance. With best-in-class corn hybrid seed, you'll see results when it comes to premium yields in all the ways that matter. Moisture, nutrition, dollars per acre, and of course, tonnage. So discover your farm's advantage, the Pride Seeds advantage. Visit your local dealer or prideseeds.com today.
You know, there's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup, weed control, field trial results, yield strategies, and so much more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF, Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest podcast today.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio, RealAg Issues Panel. Shaun Haney, Kelvin Heppner, Lyndsey Smith breaking down the biggest issues of the week. Co-ops Grown with Purpose recognizes how your farm brings sustainability, agronomics, and safety to our food, community, and environment. What you do does matter. Make it count. Contact your local co-op Grow Team member to learn more. Okay, let's dive into some policy stuff. Today I wanted to talk about college football conference championship weekend. Lyndsey wanted to talk about the new women's hockey league that is, I think, starts in about a month. Kelvin said, no, I want to talk about 234. So we'll go to 234. Kelvin, this is the never ending story. And I guess now we've sort of deferred the vote in the Senate again on this amendment that we've already turned down, and now it's back. Is there any path to closure here?
There is a path to closure, yes, but it's a question of how long it's going to take. Right now, I'm going to sound like a broken record. It's the last 3 weeks that the Senate has been sitting. They have deferred votes on amendments that have been introduced to delay this bill to Tuesday. So once again, Tuesday at 5:30 Eastern, there's going to be a vote in the Senate on the latest amendment, the latest pretty clear attempt to just delay and obstruct this bill from going ahead. And so we saw continued debate and the same arguments being made in the Senate on Tuesday and Thursday this week. And Pierre Delphine, the senator from Montreal, who has tried to disrupt this bill at the committee stage in the Senate, introduced an amendment exactly the same as what the Senate as a whole rejected on November 7th. So just 3 weeks earlier, he introduced the exact same, or pretty much the same intent behind the amendments, which would be to remove barns and buildings, basically just leave grain drying in this bill for as getting an exemption from natural gas and propane used on farms from the carbon tax. So that's the amendment that they now have to vote on Tuesday. And the senators in who are aligned with the federal government can keep doing this, can just keep introducing amendments, and each one can last up to 15 sitting days before it dies if it doesn't get voted on or acted on or debated. But they can keep doing this. The question is, though, every one of these takes up energy and takes up time and resources in the Senate and takes up political capital, and Canadians are watching this. And so does the government want to keep doing this indefinitely? The other thing that could end this is if all of a sudden there aren't enough senators that support Bill C-234 in the chamber and they sneak a vote through where all of a sudden an amendment gets through and gets approved, that's where then this bill has to go back to the House of Commons, where it would definitely or almost complete has no chance of getting back through the House of Commons. So that's kind of the two scenarios right now. Right now, it's a matter of a war of attrition, kind of in terms of political capital being put into this.
Well, and I think one of the misconceptions out there, like I received a couple messages here in the last couple of days about how, this is an anti-Western Canadian thing. And this is against rural Ontario. I think it's against all of you. Like, this isn't an East-West thing. This is rural, or this is our industry being caught in the prop wash of the government trying to hold on to a climate policy is how I would by very thin threads, like 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 you watch a movie and like Sly Stallone is like hanging off the cliff and he's like his fingernail just by the thing of the finger. That's where that climate policy is.
What we saw this week is I've talked to multiple people in Ottawa following this closely and who live and breathe on the Hill. They say this is unprecedented. At third reading, to have somebody introduce an amendment that was just defeated 3 weeks ago, like what's changed in the last 3 weeks? Nothing on this front. So to just blatantly bring back an amendment with no creativity, not even trying to take a different angle, it's unprecedented. And there's talk even that political science classes and case studies will be written about what we've seen happen with C234 here in the last couple of weeks. Go ahead, Lyndsey. Sorry, you had something to say.
No, so there's two things. One, this has exactly that. It's brought up a lot of discussions that probably haven't been in your average kitchen table discussion, as is the role of the Senate and whether or not we need an elected Senate versus, appointed senators. It also definitely, bears out that this is all about, the Liberals' climate plan. I think there was some discussion about, well, shouldn't barns just move to heat pumps? And I'd love to see that really happen. I mean, come on. Are we really going to heat barns in minus 35 degrees Celsius weather with a heat pump? And who is putting that in? When is that going to happen? How soon is that going to happen? So we've had for this bill specifically, we've had a series of unfortunate events. And those unfortunate events have been very recent, with the carve out, with the Liberals tanking in the polls, and now they are exactly that. They're trying very hard to stick with the climate action that they want, the goals that they want, and they are interfering with the Senate to do so. The problem is, to Kelvin's point, is that there are other things the Senate is going to need to deal with very soon. We have other bills that are moving through Parliament that are going to head to the Senate, and realistically, unfortunately for 234, what should have been a relatively, yes, controversial, but relatively straightforward path to law has been completely waylaid by all of this politicking and the climate action angle that the Liberals want on all of these things. One thing that is abundantly clear is this anti-rural? Is this anti-farmers? I would say this is where the Liberals fully and well, I don't think I'm overstepping by saying plenty of them don't think that livestock production should happen at the scale that it does. So maybe they're not trying to stop livestock production. They just don't really care. Like, they don't really care that it's going to cost more or to heat a barn. They just don't care. And so, is it anti this group or anti that group? Just say yes. Like, yes, they want this group that wants the Liberal, climate policy to stay where it's at. They want absolutely no more concessions made on a carbon tax. They want it to happen, and they're not even trying to pretend that they don't anymore. Unfortunately, though, at some point, they have to actually do a job, and there are more bills coming that are going to need some air. So something has to happen on this, and you're right, Kelvin. It could be, if we have senators that go home for holidays and those sorts of things, it could just be a matter of striking while the iron is hot and having a vote on something when not enough people are there for one side or the other.
Well, meanwhile, in Dubai, there's the
COP28.
COP28's going on, and there is
in Dubai.
There are so many truckloads of hypocrisy about the selection here of where they went, and how they got there. It's really easy jokes and really easy shots, but it's just so real. Let's talk about water sustainability in a place where, in the middle of the desert, where we've basically manufactured a city. Anyway, livestock. Lyndsey, you mentioned some anti-livestock. Livestock definitely get a lot of attention at COP28, although this COP meeting seems to be getting less attention overall. There was a lot more of a circus around the last one. Kelvin, what's been your impression of what's gone on at COP28 so far?
I don't think we're just in the early stages of that circus, Shaun. I think the number of people attending this COP, from what I've seen, and the greenhouse gas emissions of flights to Dubai and everything like that, I think this is the biggest ever. And so I think we're still going to see a lot more coming out of it in the next few weeks. But yeah, livestock, it sounds like the UN and some international groups are releasing some reports on livestock emissions that, of course, us in the industry don't agree with the way that they've calculated some of those emissions and things that they've left out. And so we have seen, I think, most of the major national farm groups, and especially on the livestock side of things, will have representatives at the COP meetings on the sidelines there. So we'll probably be seeing some messaging coming from them as well. So yeah, lots to pay attention to. But yeah, it seems like livestock, there has been, like you said, Shaun, too, that I think the biggest headline is the hypocrisy of it and being hosted by an oil producing country, an oil powerhouse, and all of that. And then, but it seems like livestock is right there in the top 3 to 5 headlines as well when it comes to things that are being talked about there.
Well, and throwing money around, like with no accountability to actually, does it move the needle, right? And so what I found bizarre was, we're going to try to convince the first world you need to eat less meat because you're killing the climate. But then another in 2 points below, it's about, how do we make sure that people in Africa are eating more meat because it's nutritious? It's like, okay,
why are food prices rising?
Right.
To me, agriculture needs, I don't know if I should, the argument for special treatment often gets used in agriculture, but to me, food is different than toys or other sectors where it's not as basic a necessity. They're not providing absolute need, supplying an absolute need like food. And agriculture keeps getting lumped in with these other sectors when it comes to climate policies. We're forgetting that food is a basic need of humans, and so we need to keep that in mind and weigh. There's trade-offs, and there needs to be a balancing act that happens. Food production shouldn't always be treated exactly the same as companies that make things that we don't actually need as basic necessities.
Well, and Lyndsey, these are as my grandma Mahalka would say, these bunch of yahoos. They basically, think about vertical farming. These are some of the same people arguing for this stuff, where vertical farming was going to feed the world. And now you look at some of the economic situation, we're shutting down vertical farms like crazy because why? They're not economically sustainable, at least in today's market. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, it is an excellent point, but it's also, there's a lot there to sort of touch on as well. So further to Kelvin's point, in Canada, sure, we're only 40 million people, but we produce food that is somebody else's dinner too. And that's not a bad thing. Like, other countries don't have maybe the water or the land base or the resources anymore, or maybe for decades, to actually do that. So we already, are in fact not just creating food, but we're creating food for millions of people around the world. And so what we do in Canada and what we do to our farmers in Canada and to the agriculture industry impacts millions of people around the world. And no, not just for beef and pork and rich people in Japan. We're talking about the basics of, pulses and wheat for flour. Like, we do, the very lovely, wonderful, high, value stuff, but we also do the basic staples that are on every people's plate every single day. And so yes, sometimes it's like, oh, well, why should farmers get, this or that or the other thing? It's like, because this is also an industry that produces raw commodities, which we all know the raw commodity is usually the cheapest part of any production system, for one thing, so not super high value for a lot of it. And the other is, this is a basic need right after shelter and water and air, right? So, like, this is a different scenario completely. And the other thing is exactly that. You're right, Shaun. I mean, all these vertical farms and these, actual food factory kind of things, they were producing lettuce, which lettuce is great. Lettuce is awesome. I love it. Spinach, wonderful. You don't make friends with salad. Let's put it that way.
That should be on a T-shirt. Real agriculture. You don't make friends with salad.
No, but vegetables are important, but they're usually not, they're not nutrient dense enough to build your entire meal around just spinach. It's part of a meal. It's not your whole diet. And so, while it's great that we can make lettuce in, the middle of winter and have fresh veggies in the middle of winter, that's wonderful. On the grand scheme of things, you're not meeting 2,000 calories a day with lettuce. Like, that's all there is to it. And it's a lot of lettuce. And for most of the world, or for a huge part of the world, they really are trying to get enough calories a day. They're not like the rest of North America, where most of us are trying to treadmill or Peloton most of it off. They're trying to actually meet their basic caloric needs, and you can't do it with spinach.
Well, Well
I'm off
put,
my
you guys.
soapbox.
Okay, let's take a break. We got one more segment coming up here on the RealAg Issues Panel. You're listening to RealAg Radio, of course, on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
I get to spend every day talking to farmers in the ag industry through RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio. But nothing is more fun than speaking to an audience live and in person. If you're planning an ag event, book a Real Agriculture speaker to make it a successful and memorable experience. Email shaney@realagriculture.com and you can book myself or any other RealAg personality to speak at your event. Bring your audience all the fun, insight, and energy of Real Agriculture. And welcome back to RealAg Radio, RealAg Issues Panel here on this Friday, the first day of December, which Lyndsey is very excited about. I'm not entirely sure why. It just feels like this year has zipped right by. This segment is brought to you by Blackhawk EVO from New Farm. Blackhawk EVO is the next evolution in pre-seed burn-down herbicides. Powered by Duplazin? Yes. Blackhawk EVO delivers fast, flexible, and complete control of early germinating and winter annual broadleaf weeds. Okay, now last week on the show, we were talking about changes to the underused housing tax and whether or not these changes were going to have to bring, legislation would have to happen in order for these changes to be, I guess, written in stone, so to speak. And we weren't sure. Kelvin, you've done some research and you checked with some of your contacts around Ottawa. We are going to have legislation. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. So before these changes to the underused housing tax, which are supposed to really relieve a lot of the burden, the red tape that this created over the last year, before they can actually take effect, there's going to have to be legislation that is passed. And so the government is planning to bring forward an omnibus bill that basically has all of the measures that were announced in that fall economic statement last week. This bill would implement all of those commitments that were made. And so they haven't announced when, but they are expecting, speaking to people on the government side of things, they're really confident that this bill will get through and that there won't be any questions about these UHT changes taking effect sometime in the new year. But in the meantime, for 2022, you are still required to, who own residential properties are still required to file their UHT form. The fines, though, the deadline's been pushed back a couple times now to April, and they've reduced the fines from 5 figures to $1,000 for individuals and $2,000 for corporations. So in many ways, the government, without announcing it or saying it out loud, has really walked back this underused housing tax policy. And it's basically only foreign-owned properties, and foreign owned is anything less than 90% Canadian owned that will be subject to this tax going forward if their facility isn't used for, I think it's 28 days of the year or something like that. So it really walked it back, and hopefully this makes it much less of a burden on farms and other employers across the country as well that own the housing where workers live.
So somebody from Houston, Texas has a vacation home in Vancouver. That's what we're targeting.
Yeah, Houston, Texas, or China, or they're trying to take away that foreign so there's been Asian money for example, in Vancouver. That Vancouver's kind of the example that the government would probably like to use here, not a rural property in the middle of Saskatchewan that also qualified for this. But I think they were trying to target Vancouver and Toronto with foreign money coming in mainly as an investment, not as an actual place that people were living in. And so, and then that was taking that housing supply off the market. And that was the argument for this tax in the first place.
So, but doesn't this just, isn't this just such a perfect example of putting together a bill or a law or change and really not thinking about, oh, right, there are maybe other people who also own several properties that, we're not trying to discourage them from doing that. And just, I don't know, to me, it's just so frustrating that we could have avoided all this if someone had just perhaps put some critical thought into who does this impact? is that really the goal of this? Like, I understand what the government's trying to do, right? We have a housing crisis in our major cities, especially, and they're trying to either, decrease speculation or empty housing or whatever from foreign investors, and they're trying to make more houses available. Sure, cool, but so just put some critical thought before you even introduce these things.
There's numerous examples. Like
there are
many,
there are many.
There are far fewer examples where the government walks it back and acknowledges
that they actually are walking it back.
That's where, and this is actually Marie-Claude Bibeau, our former ag minister, is now the minister at the Canada Revenue Agency, and this is a CRA policy. And so, speaking to, we actually got to speak with some of our old friends that worked in Bibeau's office. They're now working at CRA, and so. It was, it's a small world. It sounds like she was the major driver of this, of rolling back these UHT changes.
Mm-hmm. So there you go.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't want to be the minister of this, CRA revenue.
No.
That's a thankless job. Like what stakeholders are you meeting with who are like, hey, great to see you?
The CP, the accountants. Yeah.
The accountants. Yeah. Who are like,
room. That's a lively room.
Yes.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah, not a sought-after job.
It was interesting, Lyndsey, this morning on AgriTalk, we were talking about the U.S.-Canada dairy decision from last week that we discussed, and I hadn't been on the show for a couple of weeks because of some of the travel stuff like that. So we were talking about it, and message loud and clear. We were correct. This battle is not over, and that sunset clause on the USMCA agreement in 2026, dairy will once again, just like it was the first renegotiation, that is going to be a battleground, and the U.S. is going to be looking to fix what they would call this major loophole, no matter what the dispute resolution panel said. So stay tuned for more of that. That'll be fun.
Yeah, no, and I mean, we're not surprised, certainly from the U.S. side, that, this ruling did go against them, sure, that Canada doesn't have to make any further changes to how we're dealing with TRQs right now. But you're right, we're before we know it, we'll be back in negotiations, and I think this just lights a fire under the dairy side to say, all right, then let's make this really work. So then that brings in this discussion over Bill 282. And will 282 potentially add fuel to that fire? Because is it really going to protect any added access? Potentially, if there's a change of government around it, there's a lot of things at play here, but I can see certainly why there's perhaps more push on those that support 282 to get it passed. But I just think we are making, just a further entrenched focus on supply management access being a major issue for 2026 on USMCA. So I don't think this helps at all.
I think there's this false illusion for some that if we pass 282, like the Three Little Pigs, they've built in this house made of bricks, when really 282 is a house made of sticks. And it's not going to provide this fortress around this market access issue, like some are sort of under the illusion it's going to. I think it's a false sense of security, because I think it'd be very easy for the U.S. trade negotiators to say, so I don't care, pass new legislation. This is going to be a real knock them out, drag them out, which is exactly what we'd expect. There's no surprises here, but okay. Kelvin, Bill C-275, a lot of numbers.
Getting all the bills in here.
I need it written out because I can't remember it all. Yeah. Now, it's clear at the House of Commons, this is Shadow Minister of Agriculture John Barlow for the Conservative. This is his biosecurity trespassing bill. So this is one that also, I believe, does have bipartisan support from the Liberals, correct?
Yes, it does. All Conservatives, all the Bloc Québécois, and most Liberals, including the Prime Minister and Ag Minister Macaulay, voted in favor of it at third reading on Wednesday, so it cleared the House of Commons. There are a group of Liberals, as well as all the NDP and Green MPs, that are against it. So it was I think it was 278 to 36 or something that it passed. This is the bill that would make it an offense to enter a place where animals are kept without permission, if doing that would expose those animals to a disease or a contaminant or a toxin of some type. So this is in many ways to address concerns about activists and protesters entering farms and putting animals at risk, is that it would also increase the fines levied on these individuals and even possible jail time if they're convicted on these offenses. So farm groups have generally all been in support. Animal rights groups, of course, are saying this is going to target activists who expose animal cruelty, and that it's an ag law, using that type of terminology. So
blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Sean, you're showing your bias.
Yeah, I won't. We won't hide. Well,
if the activists are against it, it's got to be a great bill.
Right. That's.
Yeah.
No, okay. So, but in fairness, though.
Sorry, I'm simplifying everything.
Yeah, exactly. Focus. You're supposed to be somewhat, at least, balanced here. But no, I think that one of the challenges that in agriculture we certainly have is that we often are up against, thinly veiled, these bills that really are not what they appear to be. They are bills that are, on the surface, something that's super great and warm and cozy, but really it's the way the activists are trying to work in some rules that are going to be incredibly difficult, especially for animal agriculture. So, this is not, I don't think at any turn has been veiled in any way, but it is written the way it is, and it's proposed the way it is, under the trespass side and under a biosecurity side for very good reasons, in that realistically it's not about limiting someone's ability to protest, or it's not about somebody's difference of opinion. It's about the very real impact of the potential negative outcomes of people storming through a barn and spreading all sorts of diseases through it and killing a whole bunch of animals, whether they care to or not. So I think it's an important way to broach some of these subjects, because as livestock producers, we, even with decent trespass laws, etc., we often there's no recourse for some of the activism things that happen. So I think in general this is a step in the right direction to at least have some clear guidelines and some teeth to it. I mean, the fines are pretty significant, so I'm glad to see it, and we'll see where it goes if the Senate decides to talk about it, because they might be busy.
Now it heads into the black hole that is the Senate.
The Senate. Yeah.
It's private members' bills. We've seen what's happening with 275 or 234, here. And so it's uncertain what the timeline is going ahead for this bill. And we do have a federal election looming October 2025 at the latest. So it could be called earlier than that. And so it's a matter now of whether it can be shepherded through the Senate before. And lately, of course, the Senate seems to be full of activists as well. So
Kelvin, 30 seconds. Okay. New information coming out of the U.S. in terms of India's assassination plot. Vindication for the Prime Minister. Why? And the info that he floated in the House of Commons going months back. Why are they not talking about this from a louder voice? Hey, we were right about this.
It's a good question, and I think it does support the Trudeau argument. But yeah, it raises questions as to why, if the Canadian government knew, if Trudeau knew about this all along, why they weren't more confident in pressing and taking this stance if they knew that the U.S. would also have their backs.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hey gang, we are out of time, and it flew by. And don't worry, we're back next week. We're back on Monday. Lyndsey, have yourself a great weekend.
You as well.
And Kelvin, you as well.
Thank you. Enjoy your conference weekend, Sean.
Oh, it's going to be good. Oregon, Washington tonight. I got Oregon in the win. They are the favorite. I would probably take Washington against the spread, though. Okay, so just do the opposite. Don't take my sports gambling advice. If you have any feedback, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. And thanks so much, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. Have a great weekend, and we'll chat again on Monday. Cheers, everybody.